What's up, everybody? How's it going? Today, I want to talk about this book, The Knowledge Illusion: Why We Never Think Alone, by Steve Sloman and Philip Fernbach, right? I've written about this book on my blog, Books with Brett. So today, I'm hanging out in the Dunedin Botanic Garden. That's where I'm shooting this video. I live right across the street from this really big garden with like plants and stuff from like all over the world. It's really nice. I'm just over here hanging out on this little bench. It's a really nice day. Yeah, so a pretty good scenery around me right now. In New Zealand, it's like fall. Fall is starting, so there's like a lot of, as you can see over here, there's like a lot of like the leaves are starting to fall off and they're all like fall colors and stuff like that. But anyway, um, so today is like the first day, like as I filmed this. So as I film this video right now, today is the first day in the like New Zealand lockdown. So like New Zealand has shut down like all like businesses except for like essential services and stuff like that. So um, I thought I would come out here because I live across the street, like right across the street from this garden. So I walk out of my flat and there's like an entrance that I can like walk right into. So I come here a lot to like read. I come here a lot to just hang out, enjoy the nature. Anyway, so yeah, talking about this book, The Knowledge Illusion, right? This is like a nonfiction book. It's a psychology type book. They talk a lot about human thinking, human psychology. And as this title of the book suggests, this book is all about the fact that humans, um, we don't actually know as much as we think we know about many things in the world, right? According to the book, according to what the authors argue in this book, um, the world is a very complex place. There's a lot of information. There's so many facts. There's so many things to learn that obviously no one person can learn them all. No one person can know all of these facts. And so whenever we are talking about some issue, maybe like a coronavirus, right? Um, it's a complex thing that, we might overestimate how much we know about the virus. We might think we know a lot more about it than we actually do, when in the reality is we don't know as much as we think we do. But this can extend to all kinds of things. It can extend to things about the world, things that are happening in terms of like current affairs, um, things that are happening all over the place, or certain kinds of like scientific facts. The fact is that we know a lot less than we actually do. The authors of this book argue that we tend to suffer from overconfidence as humans. And because we suffer from overconfidence, we don't know how ignorant we actually are, right? So, these authors, they kind of make us reframe the way we think about like ignorance, right? A lot of people, like, to them, to be called ignorant is like, kind of like an insult. It's like if you call someone ignorant, it's like that's like an insult, right? Which makes sense because no one wants to be ignorant, really. But when you really think about the reality behind the situation, like if ignorance just means that you're lacking knowledge, then technically everyone is ignorant, right? I know I'm ignorant if that's what ignorant is, right? I lack knowledge about a whole bunch of stuff. So this book helps you actually embrace ignorance a little bit more. It helps you think, I don't know all the answers, and that's okay, because this book shows you that as individuals, we know very little. And like this title suggests, why we never think alone, it shows us that very little of what we think as individuals is actually like original, right? We have very few thoughts, very few opinions that are actually our own, you know. Most of what we think, most of what we believe, most of how we perceive the world is based on what other people from the past or the present day, it's based on like what other people know. It's based on what other people have been able to contribute in terms of like all the knowledge that we share. So when it comes to like a lot of the books I'm going to talk about on this channel, I'm going to kind of try to like document them as I read them. You know, it's like as I'm reading a book, I'll like kind of like, you know, cover it as I go through it, right? Talking about what I like and what I don't like. But I've already read this book. I got it for Christmas, so I've had some time to like go through it. So given that I can't really document the book with you since I've already read it, I'll kind of just give you this whole review talking about some of the stuff that I liked the most. So the two authors of this book are Steve Sloman and Philip Fernbach. They are cognitive scientists. Essentially, what a cognitive scientist is it's someone who studies the mind, like how the mind works, stuff like that. And so these guys in their book, one of the important ideas behind the knowledge illusion is the idea of what they call uh, the illusion of explanatory depth. And what that idea is it's the notion that one of the reasons why we tend to overestimate how much we know is we don't really get down to the details of certain topics. We don't get down to the details of certain issues, right? So they had an interesting study where they brought these people, like these participants, into a lab, and they asked them a few questions. The first question was, do you know how a zipper works, right? Like a jacket zipper or a pants zipper. And a zipper is something that almost every single one of us uses on a day-to-day basis, right? So you would think that like a lot of people know how a zipper works because we use it so often, right? So they asked these people like on a scale from 1 to 7, how much, like how well do you know how a zipper works? And people were usually like pretty confident, right? They usually gave pretty high answers. They usually would say like on a scale from like 1 to 7, they would give themselves like a 6 or a 7 of how they understood how a zipper worked. So then the second question was, please describe how a zipper works. Go into as much detail as you can about how a zipper works. What are the technical details as to how a zipper works, right? And you know, me thinking about it, I probably don't know the exact details about how a zipper works. I mean, I understand like the general outline, but like I don't know how a zipper works in like the most technical details probably, right? But the idea was that when these people who claimed they knew how a zipper works were actually pushed into a corner where they had to provide like the details, like give me the exact details of how a zipper works. A lot of them found that they couldn't actually explain how a zipper worked, right? So then the third question they were asked was they were asked once again, now on a scale from 1 to 7, can you re-rate how well you know how a zipper works? And what they found was that when people were asked to re-rate after they had tried to give a detailed explanation, they tended to bring their score down. So they would go from being a 6 or a 7 to being like a 4 or a 5 in how well they knew how a zipper worked, right? And what that research suggests is it suggests that when it comes to things in the world, when it comes to things like zippers, or you know, they had a similar study where they asked people how a toilet works, right? When it comes to all kinds of things in the world, we think we know how these things technically work. We tend to think we know the details, but the reality is when we're actually pushed to give the details, like an exact detailed explanation of how this thing works or how this thing is, um, we tend to realize that we don't really know a very good detailed explanation of these things. We tend to realize that we actually are overestimating how much we know and that we have an overconfidence of how we know, right? And then we realize we don't know as much about that thing as we think we do. Like the participants in that study. They thought they knew how a zipper works. They're like, yeah, I know how a zipper works. Then they have to give an explanation with all the details. Then they realize that they're lacking in so many of the details, which then kind of, you know, enlightens them to the fact that they actually don't know how this thing works as much as they thought they did, right? So that's an interesting idea to think about because I feel like that applies to me, right? Like there are many things that I think I know, but if you were to actually push me into a corner and ask me for a detailed explanation, I'd probably miss a whole bunch of important details, right? I would probably have much less of an understanding of that thing than I think I do, right? And that can be so important to realize because in that case it kind of leads us to become more humble, you know, in what we know and what we don't know. It allows us to understand how complex things really are when we try to understand them, when we try to comprehend them. You know what I mean? So, an idea that's relevant to that is the authors also talk about how human thinking can be separated into two different types, right? So, some psychologists refer to like this as system one thinking and system two thinking. The first kind of thinking is very fast, it's automatic, it doesn't take much mental effort. It's kind of like an intuition. It's kind of like a reflex in our way of thinking, right? And that's what some psychologists call system one thinking, right? Then the other kind of thinking is slower. It's more rational, more analytic. It's when you're really beginning to think things through. You're weighing out the pros and the cons, you're weighing out the different facts, you're weighing out the different details. And it's more reflective rather than reflexive. The thing about system two thinking, the thing about rational analytical thinking is our brain has limited mental resources. For example, if you have to do like a bunch of math problems over like a half hour that are like really complicated, at the end of that half hour, you might feel like your brain is like drained, right? Like, or if you've been working on some difficult problem all day, you might feel like mentally fatigued. And because our mind has limited mental capacity, right? We sometimes have to, we can't use our system two thinking. We can't always use our rational thinking. Sometimes our brain has to rely on system one thinking, which is more automatic, more reflexive, more intuitive. And the reason why this is so crucial to the knowledge illusion is because understanding complex things in the world takes a lot of mental effort. You have to not only know all the facts, you not only have to take in all the facts, you have to retain the facts. You have to make connections. You have to, you know, use your mental resources to truly understand all the complex details behind this thing, right? So when your brain runs out, so since it's really difficult to do that, sometimes our brain likes to take shortcuts. It likes to make things easier for us so we don't have to use all of those mental resources, or in a situation where our brain is fatigued and we can't use those mental resources. Um, our brain likes to make it simple, and then it kind of kicks back and relies on system one thinking, which is really automatic, which is really reflexive, which is very intuitive. And when we rely on system one thinking, we tend to simplify things. And when we simplify things, we think that it's easier to understand than it really is. You know, it's not as complex as it really is. It's simplified in our minds. And so we tend to think that we know more about it than we think we do. We tend to have an overconfidence, right? And that is one of the things that these authors argue contributes to the knowledge illusion. So one of the ideas that's crucial to this book, you know, the concept of, like it says here, why we never think alone, is that knowledge is not an individual thing, right? It's really, you know, everything that we know, all the knowledge we have as an individual, um, is something that we gain from the community. All right, so I'm switching locations because some people were like talking over there, so I didn't want to like have their conversation in the background. I'm just getting a new spot now. And this book argues that if you're an expert in a particular area, right, then you probably do not have a knowledge illusion in that area. Because when you're an expert, you know the details, you know the exact little things that can give a full explanation of whatever your area of expertise is. It's only when we begin to step out of areas that are beyond our area of expertise that we begin to experience a knowledge illusion. Knowledge is something that we do as a community, right? If you look at a beehive, like different bees, you know, you have a drone bee, you have a queen bee, you know, there's different kinds of bees that have like a particular function. As humans, we all have our own area of expertise, our own area where we are an expert. And when we combine all of our knowledge as a collective, right, as a group, is when we really have knowledge. You know, we know that, you know, we might not know some things, but we know where to go to get the answer. You know what I mean? We know that if we have questions about biology, we can go to a biologist. We know that if we have questions about law, we can go to a lawyer. We know that if we have questions about something that's medical, we can go to a medical expert, etc., you know, like a doctor. So that's why this book talks about how knowledge is a community thing. And it's something that leads us as an individual to overestimate how much we know, because we tend to assume mentally that if someone else knows the answer, if I know where to go to get the answer, if I know that if I have a question about law, I can go to the lawyer and, those different experts, then it makes me feel that I know more than I actually do, because it's kind of like I know where the knowledge is, I can go get it, which makes us, especially with like Google, because now we live in a day and age where like we can Google any question that we have. It's kind of like if you have a question about how to cook this thing, this recipe, or if you have a question about what this illness is, or if you have a question about, who won the NBA championship back in like 1963, you can just go and look it up on your phone, right? And so because we have all of this knowledge that's like in our phones and we know where to go to get the knowledge, we tend to think that, we know more things than we actually do. So the book argues that when it comes to our opinions and our beliefs, it's not as easy to change someone's opinion or to change someone's beliefs about something by giving them the facts and just showing them what the facts are, and then they're going to say, okay, so these are the facts and this is what I believe now. Because this book argues that what we believe is not based on facts, but it's more based upon our emotions. It's based on how we feel. And the reason why it's difficult to change people's opinions and beliefs about things is because our opinions and our beliefs are tied to our identity, right? They're tied also to our community. And, just to use an example, right? I don't want to get political on this channel, but just to use politics as an example, right? So a person could be a conservative or they could be a liberal, right? And if a person is a conservative, their belief in, the conservative values is a part of their identity. They perceive themselves as being a freedom-loving conservative American, right? If a person is a liberal, they might consider themselves as being an equality-loving liberal, right? And those beliefs ultimately formulate how they perceive themselves. It plays a role in how they perceive themselves as an individual, how they perceive their self-concept. It also comes down to our communities, right? If a person considers themselves to be a conservative, they perceive themselves as being part of a conservative community that believes all the same kinds of things they do, and they feel like they're a part of that in-group. They feel that camaraderie, right? Same thing with a liberal. Person is a liberal, they find all the people in the liberal community who believe the same things as them. That's their group, right? So if you change a person's beliefs, right, if you present a person with these facts and show them how their beliefs are false, right, then it's not so simple as, oh, here's the facts, now I'm going to change my mind and according to those facts. A person has to tweak their identity. A person has to tweak their sense of belonging to their community. And those are difficult things to do. Someone can't just change how they perceive themselves like that. Someone can't just change their community just like that. So our opinions and our beliefs are really centered on deep things that are difficult to change, and that's why it's difficult to change people's opinions about certain things in the world. Anyway, those were some of the important things I felt like this book was talking about. This is really an interesting book. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who likes human psychology, who's interested in human thinking. This book definitely is enlightening in terms of being able to make us more humble, in terms of how we think, in terms of what we think we know. When you have conversations with people, you might be more willing to like listen to them and think, maybe this person has a point, maybe this person can teach me something, since I probably don't know as much as I think I know about this particular thing. So I feel like this book is a good book to read if you want to really reflect on what you know, what the limits of your knowledge are, and things like that. So anyway, I hope you guys like this video. In some of the articles on my blog, I wrote some of like more of like the details of this book that I wasn't able to really cover in this video. So if you want to learn some more of the details, you can visit my blog, www.bookswithbrett.com. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll be bringing you more videos about different books that I'm reading in the future. So stay tuned for what I got coming up soon. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.